Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I just want to quickly go through this revamp that Cryptic is doing for the intelligence specialization. I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible without wasting too much of your time, so let's just dive right into it. The Intel specialization is the very first spec that we got in the game many years ago. It is still a fairly good specialization to this day, but it has some issues that have made it fall a bit behind in the view of most players. The first thing we see an issue with is the ability gather intel. Now, gather intel is what you get on intel ships that have a commander intel seating. It is the unique perk for intel ships. Gather intel is something that you mark on a target, and after a certain amount of time, it will give you options to debuff that target. And the changes that they're making are making it so that the stacks will build up faster so you can debuff the targets faster. And the debuff is going to be doubled in duration from 15 seconds to 30 seconds. In addition, against NPCs, there's not going to be a lockout if people want to hit the same debuff immediately afterwards. However, on players, the lockout duration has been doubled from 15 seconds to 30 seconds. This is basically, this isn't going to make Intel primary ships like suddenly better, but it is going to make them slightly more appealing to some playstyles. If you are someone that actually hits the gather intel ability and is hitting it on targets that are going to benefit from those types of debuffs. I do like these changes. I do wish that they had made it so it would just automatically start like building up stacks on like the biggest foe near you, but I understand why they left it as a completely player controlled ability. But from that ease of use, and I think, the fact that most people in the game don't hit abilities, it would have been nice for it to have at least passively started to build up stacks on nearby foes, or at least foes that you were hitting. Now, moving on, for the actual Intel Bridge Officer abilities, the first one that they've changed is Evade Target Lock, and basically they're making it so that this ability can scale up based on your control expertise skill. And they have changed it so that the accuracy penalty that used to be there is now a damage penalty, meaning that if you hit a foe with this, their damage to you is reduced, but their damage to your teammates is still the same. So this is going to help it, or help you survive if you have a target that is just hammering you and you want it to do less damage to you. That is what this ability is going to do. Just note, though, that as I said, it is only affecting you, so your teammates are still going to take a bit of damage from it. It's not going to work like Command's Suppression Barrage, where it will just straight up reduce the damage output from that target to everyone. It's just for you. Next up, we have Intel Team. Intel Team is already pretty good. If you saw my video last year regarding how the high-end solo elite runs are done, Intel Team is a core component of that. And they're making it so that this will reduce your threat even more. The stealth values have been buffed up to the rank 3 values of Intel Team. There's a defense buff that's been increased, and they've added a perception buff that is going to make it easier for you to see cloaked opponents. Overall, the Intel Team changes are nice. The only thing that I would add to this is, well, this applies to all team abilities, is just lowering the activation time of the team abilities. They all have a 1-second activation time, and it'd be really nice if that could be reduced to even like a tenth of a second or half a second, just not a full second. The full second is pretty rough. Subspace Beacon, I think Subspace Beacon had, if I recall, you place this down and you can activate it at will to teleport back to it. Uh, this ability basically never gets used, and I think that's probably going to remain the same. Moving on to good abilities, Electromagnetic Pulse Probe. This will move faster. It will damage foes in the path between you and the target. It will be buffed up by particle gens for the damage, and the disable will be boosted by control expertise. But the big thing here is that the EMP probe will now count as a control bridge officer ability, which means it's going to work with unconventional systems. So you're going to see this used on more builds. Next up, we have Ionic Turbulence. This is going to move to the targets faster than it currently does. This is a debuff, and that the debuff is going to now scale with Aux Power, which is going to be quite nice for those of you running support builds. This power is also going to be a control ability, which means, like EMP Probe, it is going to be affected by, or it is going to work with unconventional systems. So I think you're going to see EMP Probe and Ionic Turbulence start to pop up on more builds, as a lot of people at this point have heard about unconventional systems and are very much taking advantage of it. I like these changes. For Ionic and EMP Probe, they are the two abilities here that I'm most likely to put on more builds. Kinetic Magnet. This is a rough one. I fly a lot of torp boats. I do a lot of supporting on some of my builds for people running torp boats. And unfortunately, the changes that they've made to this ability are not enough. They're increasing the amount of debuff that this does, but only for kinetic resistance. It will go from a max of 30 to a max of 50. It will last for 15 seconds, but they have doubled the amount of mines and torps it can pull in, and they have doubled the distance in which it can pull mines or torps in towards the target. The issue is, if I hop in game here, Kinetic Magnet is an ability that goes in the Lieutenant Commander or Commander seats, I believe. Or no, I'm wrong. No, it starts at Lieutenant, ends at Commander, my bad. But even then, the issue is that the Commander rank, where there's this, it will be a minus 50 debuff, it is competing against Attack Pattern Beta 3 in a tactical intel seat, if that's what your ship has. Attack Pattern Beta 3 does minus 50 debuff to anything you hit, and it's an all damage resistance debuff. Kinetic Magnet is going to do minus 50, but only for kinetic, and it's only going to hit one target. So the issue is, the debuff is too small, given that this is just a single target, and it's for only one type of resistance. I do like the changes, to the distance and the max amount of mines it can pull in, but I still think that, given that this is a commander slot that could be competing against, something like an Attack Pattern Beta 3, I really think this needs to be increased to at least 100 debuff for the commander version of Kinetic Magnet. Maybe even more. I do want to use this ability, but it is extremely hard for me to justify on builds given the limited magnitude of the debuff compared to something like Attack Pattern Beta, which is going to affect every target I hit. This is, just hitting one target, and it's not going to be as potent of a debuff as Beta once you factor in all these torp and mine builds have other damage sources like subspatial warheads that are going to be dealing damage to the targets. So it's nice to see this ability get some changes, but I think it still needs a bit more. And just a reminder, the fragile damage cap on it was removed a long time ago. Surgical Strikes is an ability that's fallen way out of favor. This is basically a different take on Beam Overload as we currently know it. Beam Overload did not always work like it currently does. Beam Overload used to suck quite a bit. Beam Overload used to only buff a single shot out of your beam weapons, and that was it for the entire time it was up, but that has now changed. Surgical Strikes had a use back in the day, and while these changes are nice, the only way I see Surgical Strikes being relevant with this is if you don't have a lot of the high-end items. This is probably going to be more of like a budget build option, but ultimately we're going to have to wait to see Surgical Strikes first Beam Overload once these changes come out. We're going to need to do some actual testing, but I don't have high expectations of this. And the last ability is Transport Warhead. Transport Warhead, there's no good way to say this, and even here they say, truthfully, this ability could benefit from further review and tuning. The issue with Transport Warhead is that it just transports over a normal torp to your target with 100% shield pen. That just isn't enough nowadays. If I look at like one of these high-end ISC runs, I'm going into that first group of infected with 100% shield pen for all of the torps I'm firing for that initial first group in there. So with the amount of power creep we have, there's just not anything really where you will benefit from Transport Warhead over a high yield or a torp spread. It's literally just sending over a normal, unbuffed copy of your torpedo to the target ship just with 100% shield pen. That's all it's doing. So Transport Warhead really needs some more love, and I just don't know what to say for it. I think if it was like a clone of high yield, it might be better. If it was sending over like a high yield, then that would be a different story and would be more useful. As is, though, Transport Warhead 3 goes into the commander slot on a ship. Transport Warhead 2 also is a commander. So this is an ability that starts at a lieutenant commander level. I don't think it would be that big of a deal if Transport Warhead sent over a high yield 3 of a torpedo with 100% shield pen, given that it's going to be it would be most likely used at a commander level in that scenario. I don't think that would be that bad of a that big of an issue. I think people would probably use it if that were the case. But in this current state, it's just really hard to justify using it. It's just an ability where you slotting it is basically lowering your damage output. Overall, I like the changes. The highlights are Ionic Turbulence, EMP Probe, and Intel Team definitely is also really nice. And the Gather Intel mechanic. The duds here, really, it's Transport Warhead is the dud. I don't know what they can do for that. And Kinetic Magnet, the debuff is still just way too low, in my opinion. But I don't want to go too long here. I've already been talking for 14 minutes. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below and I will get back to you when I can. Thanks for watching. See you all next time.